Whenever we turn another page on the newspaper, or we tune in to listen to the news or watch the news, it seems there's always a disheartening update about a man who has stabbed his girlfriend to death, or another student at the university who has decided to take their lives. And in these instances, these stories could easily be taken for people being less resilient, or they were just crazy. And this is the reason today that we are having a conversation about depression. Not to say they might have done those things because of depression, but see depression as an underlying issue, as one of the components that may drive people to taking their own lives, taking other people's lives, or destabilizing our societies. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Claudia. I'm super excited to be here, and I truly appreciate you joining in. If you've been watching these episodes, we truly appreciate it. We truly appreciate the feedback that you give us, the long paragraphs that you write about your takeaways, and the ways that you think we could continue to improve how we deliver this message to you. We want to get this message to as many people as possible so that we make sure that we're creating the kinds of environments in the world that we want to see around us. Yes, today we are talking about depression. And I know it's not quite a very exciting thing to talk about. I was thinking as I was preparing for this session to say, oh, Claudia, you're speaking about depression. You know, most of the time you just want to talk about upbeat things that make people feel good about themselves and about the world. But depression is becoming a global issue, is becoming a challenge. We see this in both in low economically developed countries and the elite economies. So this is a universal thing. I would say that if you're not infected, you are affected. You know where that slogan comes from. And I think it is becoming quite a thing for depression as well. We're seeing a lot of young people and older people experiencing depression. And if you don't understand what depression is, I wouldn't like to talk about it from the perspective of it being chemical imbalances and all scientific. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. But I would just like to talk about it as something that we all occasionally, frequently, intermittently experience. These prolonged feelings of sadness, this existential angst, this losing hope from time and time again, losing energy, withdrawing from activities that we used to love doing, withdrawing from society, being chronically sad. And as we move on, I'd just like to introduce to you that today we have a ghost guest, Coffee, and we'd like to keep this chilled, relaxed, and more like a conversation. We'll start by getting aligned on what we mean in terms of depression in Eswatini, in an African context, just get aligned on the causes of depression, and then go on to discuss what we can do given our circumstances to face depression, to deal with depression. Sonke iyasithinza, sonke iyas-affecta, yini lesingayenda, given our environment, our current environment. So, Coffee, thank you so much, even though I took you by surprise, but thank you so much for availing yourself. I know that you're always available to be having these kinds of conversations. You and I are both passionate about wellness, mental health, community values, core values, anything that is helping us become better individuals. So, yeah.
I'm so happy to have this chance. Like you just said, it's something that is close to my heart, to have such conversations, and given a chance to have conversations in such audiences for the aid and the betterment of the next person. And by virtue of us being positioned in that way, I've realized that having such conversations, we might think that we're helping the next person, but most of the time we are helping ourselves, because talking about them makes us realize things that we are going through and how we dealt with them. And then by virtue of doing that, we are mastering the skill of dealing with those things. So I guess I'm just trying to say I'm really excited to have this conversation and looking forward in what the universe is going to lead us into discovering today about ourselves, and maybe aid even the listener or the person that is watching to discover something about themselves as well.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I like the point you touched about how we are helping ourselves when we talk about these conversations.
Fact.
And also, it's just more of to sensitize you as usabukela. Where by merely listening and tuning in here, from today, you'll take away that even if you don't think you're the one who's depressed, or let's not diagnose ourselves, we're experiencing this deep feelings of sadness, you'll get to notice, you'll be sensitized around how many people are going through it around you. And also the importance of just having the conversations and normalizing it in our communities. Because if it's not you, it's probably somebody that you know. So once you have more information, you'll be more intentional, more careful, more mindful, more empathetic in how you help someone who's going through it, in how you help yourself, in how you become that element that makes community better by just merely being aware. So having touched on that, Coffee, I'm just keen to pick your brain on this. What do you think are one of the causes of depression in our societies? Why is it depressed?
Well, there are a lot of aspects that we can say are the roots causes of depression in society, and I've came to realize that depression, like I'm glad that you said something about us trying to shy away, not because we're avoiding that element, defining depression in the medical terms or whatsoever. I think that takes a certain level of study and certain level of certification or whatsoever to then get to the point where you even understand it in that route. And that's important. But I'm just trying to say, I think society by society, or economy by economy, place by place, environment and by environment, so much so that even person by person has their own way of how they can define this thing that we can call depression, or that we call depression. There might be a thread that connects all of us together, but then at the end of the day, it is something that an individual experiences on their own or by themselves, and then they classify, or it's classified as depression. So having said that, this simply means that they could be different roots that stems out to brew out this thing that we can call depression. But one of the things that I am so fascinated about these days, and looking so deeply towards trying to understand it for myself, maybe, and maybe for even people that are around me, is the environment. And by environment, I'm talking your home environment, I'm talking your at work environment, I'm talking your friends environment or whatsoever, even school or whatsoever. Those elements or those places or environments, I have came to a point of realizing they play a very much huge part in what leads an individual in feeling a certain way. And a certain way could be at peace, could be happy, and can be even anxiety and that depression. So it is important then to analyze and look carefully on where you are, the patterns that are of that place, and how they contribute in the person that you are, in the way that you think, in the way that you feel. What are things that triggers you to feel a certain way? And what are things that triggers you to express yourself in a certain way? So, because at the end of the day, those are the things that builds up into you being depressed or you feeling that way. Okay, now, maybe just for a sec, let us try and make this clear. Depression is a state of mind, right? And a state of mind is built about a feeling or a way that you, not built about, maybe defined by a way that you feel. I feel depressed, or I feel anxiety because there are elements that has contributed in me feeling that way.
Okay. All right, Coffee. I totally understand where you're coming from, that most of the time the environments that we're in, they contribute to us feeling depressed. So, but I don't want us to just minimize depression as just being a mere feeling. So right now, I just want to share with the audience that you currently maybe experiencing these deep feelings of sadness.
Yeah.
But we don't just want to minimize it to just it being a feeling.
Yeah.
There are valid reasons in our ecosystem, in our environments that facilitate this, that we see, that are actually tangible. And one of them that we could just talk about is poverty. Yeah. So this is a known fact. Even when 100%. You look up online, wherever, if you could go on the internet, 60% of the population of Eswatini lives below the poverty line.
Yeah.
Now, this means that more people are exposed to chronic stress. They're exposed to they can barely meet their basic needs.
Yeah.
And uyasibona nje le stress leso nje. Nasibuka Maslow's hierarchy of needs, lapha ekuqaleni, the fundamental things that the average person needs: shelter, food, clothing. Nowadays singasho nokuthi education as well. Those are the fundamentals. And then now masesikhulumela ipoverty sichaza ukuthi you don't have access to those things. Stress sakho si at peak because your survival is challenged here. And that said, ungatikhanza even so withdraw manje. So yeah, withdraw my relationships, kuma friendships. One of the things that I learned while doing my undergrad is how poverty strips a person off of their dignity. So net dignity yakho nje nawe kutiva ungumuntu ebantwini kuyehla because of poverty. Nalabanye bamfu maybe abakuhloniphi nebamfu abasaku-invited inventabo. Ne-opinion yakho kude loyithatha serious because yini wena uhluphekile. So which means that when we see such large numbers, when we talk about such percentages, it means that most people are vulnerable to what? To depression. And it could be one of the major leading causes of it in the kingdom, in Africa, or even the world at large.
Exactly.
Right.
And Claudia, sorry, I like how you just broke that down. Sakuluma the poverty element of things that contributes into depression. And you also, even in your point, as you were making your point, you talked about the hierarchy of needs. So the main need, this is my 2 cents, the main need of a human being or a person, or maybe one of them, it is the need of survival. As you're placed in this universe or in this planet or in this place, wherever you are, the one main thing that you are trying to do is to survive. As we were setting up earlier, one of the things that we talked about was doing life, this life thing. The doing life is basically, at the core of it, is we're trying to talk about how can we survive better. And poverty is part of that, things that contribute in the survival. And as I was saying, one of the things you then even said, it can be food, it can be shelter, it can be clothing. And then you said we can even introduce nowadays the element of education. So which means with time and time, or with place and place, these needs of survival, they vary and they grow and they...
Absolutely.
Which then defines poverty, or which defines the need or the lack in different aspects. So I think it's important for us as humans or as people to, again, going to my point of environment, to scrutinize the environment, to say, okay, if we're saying poverty in Eswatini is one of the elements that contributes in being depressed, what is it that then defines the poverty in that environment?
I love that. Coffee is speaking about how even poverty in itself is subjective, and it's one of the things you will learn when you learning environmental economics, that it depends on who's doing the study where. And something that my mother will normally reference to is that ngibekise njengomuntu ohlala emakhaya, ngendeka they walk long distances to school, ngendeka bayahamba bayohlakula emasimini, ngendeka batidlela nje indengane inqonqa banathe amahewu batidlele nembhidvo inyama once in a month and then when you feel like oh bayahlupheka for sure depressed
100%.
kanti ngenteka it's a way of life
Exactly.
hayi ukuthi bayahlupheka for where they are it's a way of life kusengaka progress ukuthi there's technology so no kude lo tiva ngathi uhluphekile and you may find ukuthi there are more people labahluphekile emadolobheni because emadolobheni ude nalengathe noma ukuthi ungalima kuphi ube nekudla uyabona and now ude imali yegibela kusho ukuthi awukhona ukufika la ufise kuyofika khona kanti lena hayi ukuthi ude imali yegibela iway of life nje uthi mele uvuke nga5 okay uye esikolweni you know so I totally like that ukuthi even when it comes to poverty it has a subjective definition and now just to move on a little bit now there's the youth we're talking about poverty. Now there's lack of opportunities for the youth and unemployment. Majority of the youth, when we look at statistics or research studies, they show that approximately 35% of the Eswatini youth are neither employed nor in education or training, which increases their vulnerability to mental health issues. And as we know, the Bible says, an idle mind is the devil's workshop.
100%.
Like, if there's nothing engaging you, Vele, you are prone to be, first of all, you tend to think more about yourself. You tend to think more and internalize more about relationships, about what is happening in the world. And go figure to a point whereby ngendekas realize how much tinzaba ngibekise. The more we're getting national updates, mawuthi ubukela tinzaba or ufunza ephepheni, you get updates. Get depressed. Maybe you start losing faith in our governments. The more you realize, maybe you get more access to information about politics or about religion. Elon Musk in the States, they formed IDOJ. When they formed IDOJ, they cut US aid because they realized that funding goes out so much, but it goes to people's pockets. And you find that funding only helps 1% of the people that it's targeted to help. So, you know, when you kind of learn about those things, they just make you lose hope and trust. I once came across a post where a person talked about how I feel like there's no one in the world who's trying to solve any of the problems, but everyone is just trying to make money so that none of the problems get to affect them. So the more you learn about those things, kugwenda uluze hope. Now maybe you feel like you don't have trust in the systems that are there, in the governments that are there, that they have their best interest at heart for you. Maybe you get to think more about religion as well, and you start questioning about God, about fairness, about justice, about wars, about poverty, as we said. All of those things really crippling you, making you more susceptible to mental health challenges. But in just sakhuluma ngayo yona indzaba lack of opportunities. What do you think about that regarding the youth and then them being susceptible to more depression?
It's that Claudia is one thing that I even personally I'll say I'm probably even experiencing it right now. The lack of opportunities, and it's even way more sad when you've done what has been made to be the prerequisite for you to have opportunities, but only to find that at the end of the day, those opportunities are not there. It seems like now you were given a blueprint of the wrong...
the key to success.
I mean, because we are told education is maybe let's just go straight to that. Education is the key to success, like you just said, or funds utobang mundu. But then ufunza, and at the end of the day you discover ukuthi it's like late definition of kubang mundvu anginiketwanga ukuthi yini lo mundvu lengitoba nguye, right? Not to say there's something wrong with education, just everything right about education. I'm not blaming education. I'm just saying, again, going back to the subjectiveness of everything. What does it mean to say funzu tobang mundvu? Is it a common sense that is actually common, or it's a common sense that was common for a group of people? Is it still serving us, or is no longer serving us? So all those things are things that boil down to the opportunities that we're talking about, to say, what are the opportunities that we as young people are looking for? The highlight of everything is that we're looking for employment because we need money. And we need money because that's the main mood of survival nowadays. And then again, as you can see, it goes back to this needing of survival, right? So then if there's a lack of the opportunity or the employment which is going to make me then have money that is going to enable my survival, then at the end of the day, I'm not going to be at a good space about this environment that I am in, because it is lacking these things that facilitate. And the craziest thing, again, at the end of the day, is that the environment itself creates these boundaries. And then again, it creates things that says these are the gates or the doorways, and only to find go to the doorways, they end up being locked, and somebody keeps on changing the locks and everything. So then for me, I think at the core, at the end of the day, one needs to then, I think that's where then we go to an extent of then needing to talk about purpose, needing to then find, actually, at the end of the day, what is it that Claudia or Maibongwe or Coffee, at the end of the day, is designed to be in this planet or in this world for? Because I think if I get to realize that, the education system can only help me aid that or destroy that.
I mean, I totally get you, my boy, on that. Okay, here we say there are no opportunities, no job opportunities. The government often will talk about young people being resourceful, being entrepreneurial, business forward thinking, sort of. And so many times I've heard people who have walked the path who would say they're successful or they seem successful say, "Emaswata ya vilapa." You know, bamfuba ya vilapa. And now you're talking about us understanding what we're here for on earth. And then my question is, do you think siya vilapa vele? Are people not trying?
No, man, I don't think Emaswati are vilapa. And this is me. This is my bong. I don't think Emaswati are vilapa. And I know I'm going to sound like a scratchy disc, but again, it goes to the environment. If you're going to train me, and I'm sorry, I might sound, this might sound a bit crazy. If you're going to train me, vila, and then masengil vila, then you're going to say vilapa. It doesn't make sense for me. What do you mean vilapa when you train me vila? Let me explain what I'm trying to say here. If you're going to only train me for an office desk job, and then masengihleli because you haven't given me an office desk job, then saying vilapa. What do you mean? Doesn't make sense, right? Only now that I feel like probably our environment, which is Eswatini, is trying to revolve that or trying to readjust that by means of actually understanding that maybe we cannot offer all these young people employment. Maybe let us try and look for other means by how can we incapacitate them to employ themselves. Das bolim kokwini, das what's this? There's another place by Ngwenya that they are Bovoktim and all that. So all those things now they are, but they still haven't got as much attention as Gwaluseni. They still haven't got as much attention as your Scott and your traditional, your Ngwane, Teachers College and all that, your nursing. Because yesterday, maybe not even yesterday, Itolo, the idea was funzu tobang tishela or ubeng nurse or ubeng bani, so that our government can consume you. And when they consume you, you will have a job, you will have job security, you will have a pension and all those things. And a lot of us vele safunzela logo, but then only to find gutsi asiktholi at the end of the day. So then to answer your question briefly, to answer your question, I don't think Emaswati are vilapa. Just like I don't think Swazis are not creative. They are good creative Swazis. They are music wise, whatsoever, they are great, but they don't have the system. The system itself is not supportive of those things.
Yeah.
So then it appears as if sihleli or a sick dream or a sick feast or whatsoever.
Yep.
Environment plays a huge role.
Yeah. I totally hear you. And one other thing that I want to touch on, especially young people, especially as see sazama impilo and are probably unemployed, is also to say, as Coffee has already touched on finding purpose and just being creative, and njengoba sakhulunywa ukuthi we must start our own businesses. And from just starting your own business, kulkun, especially now with the backup, someone pushing you, or where you can, someone talk emotionally support or financially support you, kulikhuni. And then nayo ngisho soyiqalile ukhanza ukuthi maybe it's not enough to provide for lamaphupho lasinawo. We have big dreams. We want cars, sifuna kwakha, sifuna kushada, sifuna kuba nebantwana, sifuna kugcoka kahle, sifuna kuba ne-vacation. And so yayiqala leyo business, maybe it doesn't even make enough for ukuthi ungaphila nekuphila, I understand. But nje while on that, because ngiyalo sithini, we are being realistic to say that's the truth of the matter. But while we are at it, I just want to say it's where the importance of also resilience comes in. And the importance of acceptance, because it's easy to also feel like maybe we are going through this because Eswatini, noma because Simaswati, noma because we're in Africa. But I just want to touch on the fact that this is something that is happening universally, globally, just probably maybe at different scales. Because if you've watched previous episodes, you already know that I work with Westerners. And, you know, sometimes when I hear them tell stories or we have conversations, sometimes they'll drop something like, oh, there's a friend that I knew growing up, they had to share shoes with their sibling. So it would be them today wearing shoes to school and the next is the other, and they had to walk long distances to school. And when you hear such stories, you always related them to being something that is African or from your region. And then when you learn that, even in these elite countries, these things happen. Why am I sharing this? Just for you to maybe, let's say, sensitize you to say that suffering, poverty is probably something that is universal. And for different reasons, like you said, the environments, there's probably gatekeeping, there's probably people holding doors and changing the locks from time to time. And I just want to say, okay, while we're at this journey, it's important for us to be cognizant of this, but not to lose faith, not to lose energy, but to just kind of hang in there. It's important to hang in there while you're still pushing the business, really stay optimistic, resilient, understanding that this is something that is happening globally. And speaking of which, suffering is something that has always happened since time immemorial. People have always complained for more, for wanting to pay less taxes maybe, and for equality. There's always people who has lived as kings, who lived in abundance, and then people who are slaves. And I think one of the things that Stoics taught me is that, you know, even if you become a slave, be the best slave while at it.
That's
sometimes,
the purpose.
Yeah, that's the purpose.
I'm sorry not to say the purpose you're slave.
But like, if that's the hand that you've been dealt, you face it head on, the best way that you possibly could. And look, it's hard coming from me as well, sitting here from a place lene roof benglile, and it's like, Claudia, what are you telling me right now? But I'm just saying this from the perspective namigendeka nangithi ngiyabukela people from South Sudan, Congo, Central Africa. They are people who, as much as nakhona there are rich people in those countries, there are people in the worst imaginable cases, whereby umumvu idream bekuthi nje yabona mangagcine ngithola itrack ngishayele yona, and ushayela le track and makasahamba kule track mele bashintshe amathaya balungisa, umgwaqo is horrible, they're in the worst of conditions, lo mumvu loyo. But when you say, what would you tell to that person? What would you tell them? To be resilient, to be strong, because you can't fix the world overnight. We work over things with time. You tell them to be strong, to hang in there. So this is just basically a message to say, while sisapanda sapusha, let's be strong, let's be resilient. If you're a slave addict, be a slave head on with strength, hang in there. Everyone has been dealt the hand that they've been dealt. So it's important to face it head on. And while facing it head on, sometimes akusukona ukuthi udumsebenzi. Unawo, but maybe awujabulisi lo msebenzi. But you know, if you become the best, first of all, if you start by understanding the role that you serve la ukhona khona imcoka. I always try to think of even people maybe labasebenzela hulumende bayavuka every day. Maybe they are not happy about umholo laba now. But lokuvuka kwakho every day and to show up in that role, it's very important. You are saving lives. You are imparting valuable knowledge. All of that is shaping the environment. And as much as maybe you're not happy about your pay, you're contributing massively to society. And once you appreciate the value that, as you said, purpose, maybe that's what you came on earth to do, nyalo. And as much as we're still aspiring for a better world that we want to see, maybe it's not all of us that are going to enjoy the benefits of the world we're trying to build manje. Maybe we will enjoy them, or Bamfabe will enjoy them. Just like our 4 ancestors, they fought for freedom, but maybe akusibona baba free sek enjoy thina namuhla. Namuhla we have access to bogesi, to emandi, to fresh food, because bona they fought for what they fought for. So nathi while at it, we are fighting for what we are fighting for. Sito sebendela lokole stock sebendela in this 60 to 90 years that we're here, but it's laying grounds for those who are coming after us.
100%.
So it's basically just really imparting that kind of motivation out there to say, let us be resilient. While on depression, there's other things that make depression one of the reasons why we see more depression out there. Some of them being health-related challenges. I think we are amongst the leading countries that are seen to be experiencing HIV/AIDS prevalence and TB. And that said, it's when you look at these things, you need to do your fact finding, because sometimes via Shogutu we may come across as leading because we're a small population. Maybe it's not drastic in that way, but nonetheless, it does affect us heavily. And people who are sick, one of the things that I learned about, I remember bekuba nema visits sesesikolweni from the different organizations, but those fundisa ngako ukhanza ukuthi they even get to experience a pill burden. Pill burden is whereby you've been taking the tablets for so long, so ze utsiniwe. So this is something that would not only affect people that live with HIV/AIDS and TB, could be people who have diabetes, high blood pressure, or labanatha ngisho maphilisi ekuhlela phela nje kunatha liphilisi uhamba udzinwe uyabona. So it could be some of the reasons that we notice siphila nabo bamvu labagulako in our communities. Nalokudati nje ukuthi ish yathi nginokugula lokhona mina sengidepende kuleli philisi leli. And just merely being sick in itself can really depress the body. Low energy, you're not able to fight diseases enough. So just to share this, to say we need to be sensitive as sisapila, even ngisho lamakhaya, siphila naye make noma ngogo noma ngibhuti uyagula, sibe nayo le sensitivity ukuthi kulokunye ngendeka kuyam affecta ukuthi angabi as mentally strong, resilient to even face the day-to-day challenges of life, right? And kusese lapho, our mental health infrastructures, I think they are limited. We do not maybe have enough qualified people. I've brought previously in one of the episodes, in our societies, there's one psychiatrist who's supposed to serve 10,000 people in that population. So overwhelmed lo mumvu loyo. And sometimes info being about a solution, maybe you just need someone to listen to you attentively. Ukjaga fast depression. Because I have so many patients, I don't have time to be listening to you. It's some of the maybe my infrastructures, they are not equipped enough to take care and assist people in that manner.
Eddie, maybe can I just add this as you're talking about that? I think I will challenge myself and probably you. I'll also challenge you to, as people that we said we're interested in the space, to probably do a research on how much muscle does our society has to support that level of health mentally, people's mental health. And I'm saying this because it's kuneng lele we outcry compared to what then serves as solutions. Let me make an example about counseling. Locally, I haven't heard, maybe it's because of kungabi much exposed to Guam. That's why I'm saying I'm challenging myself, and maybe you can help me with this challenge to find how many counselors do we have, people that you can actually book a session with them, and they sit you down and you sit down and they really have a conversation of mentoring and counseling you, guiding you literally on a day-to-day or session by session or whatsoever. I think that's
Yeah.
one thing that probably we even fail. And how accessible are those people, and how available do they make themselves? Except pastors, except teachers, your career guidance teacher, your those type of people that, I mean, like people that are really designated in this field of saying, you know what, I'm just going to serve humanity in this society that I'm in by availing myself to guide people through whatsoever that they are going through mentally and whatsoever. Except for a psychiatric center listener. I think it's one thing that maybe vele our society lacks, to say siyakhula in whatsoever other net things that we need to grow into, your education, your whatsoever, but mhlawumbe leli side leli asiliketi attention kuze sikhule kanye nalo. I'm just saying it's something that we also need to pay attention to, so that we can understand how then do we position ourselves with that lack. Because when you understand the lack, you can then position yourself better in how do you so we endane mangabe we are shorter, we substitute noma kwenda kanjani, lesikhala lesishoda usivala ngani noma uyabona.
Yeah.
It's just something that I'm thinking as we're talking about it, that to bring on the table, to be mindful of.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for posing that. I think when you speak of the lack of infrastructure, sometimes it's even because of lack of knowledge. So that's a good question that you pose. And we will be talking in about some of the solutions that are readily available. But I would also say that sometimes it's maybe the information is not accessible. Asati. It's there, but asati. And some of the intentions of this podcast is to raise awareness and sort of increase the accessibility or knowledge about what's available for you in terms of knowledge facilities that could help when it comes to mental health issues and any other issues relating to social issues. So yeah, thank you for that one, Coffee. And other aspects that I would like to touch on that exacerbate depression, if I may say, they are cultural and societal influences. We've noticed this quite a lot, the stigma around depression. Sometimes ukhanza ukuthi even when you disclose, especially my baby boomers, basangakaya accept, basangakaya understand. But I think things are moving, and I'm very happy because now you come across a lot of people even touch on the word depression. Seba more receptive of the idea, seba understand. Lengunaka ukuthi bona batas nabakhuluma abantu abadzala basho thina bengekho ngetikhathi stefule emfodena thina and kuning bekungekho. But
the question is, bengekho in vele noma they were not aware that they are going through that.
Good question. I normally say bekukhona.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the vocabulary to describe it, to understand it. But at the same time, I also do think they didn't have the vocabulary and the awareness of it. Labanye bekubasita. They went through traumatic things, but because they didn't know what it's traumatic, it didn't register, so it didn't have the effects in their lives like that. What it's traumatic and it's making them depressed. They took it as a way of life or as a part of life.
I will agree and disagree, not disagree, but argue to say, you see, things they kuthi uyakwati noma awukwati doesn't avoid them to show up in you. Let me expand on that. If I know that I how do I put this? If ngingadi ukuthi if ngingadi ukuthi ngistressed, if let me say I'm stressed, and we've seen this sometimes futhi, and I've been overworking myself, and then suddenly sengibulawa inhloko, suddenly senginama back pains and whatsoever, and I'm not aware that this is because of what is going on internally, which is the stress and which is the overworking of myself and whatsoever. And then I go to seek, uyadingibulawa inhloko man, inhloko ayipheli, and then dokotela athi asuhlalela iviki ungayi emsebentini, unathe amanzi, drink a lot of water, and after that week you discover ukuthi awuyathi vele seyiyaphela le nhloko. And then when you go back, athi bobuya sto check ukuthi kuhamba kanjani, I think ushoda ngemali. They are being smart about it. When you come back, then they tell you, no man, asungichazele usebenta kuphi, kwendekani, uyabo. Then they get to tell us, no, these are signs and symptoms of stress. Then now you then know, oh, stress mina singenda kaso. So this is to say, they might have been going through what we call nowadays as depression, and it might have been showing up on them in different ways. Abaneng batali bebathetha and batvume ngaloko, bathetha, they are harsh, they are violent and whatsoever. What if, I'm just saying, what if that was how them depressed was showing up on them? Them being anxious was showing up on them. They end up being hostile to the environment, to the kids, to the whatsoever.
Absolutely.
So I'm just saying, maybe they didn't have the terminology, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there and it wasn't showing up on them.
Absolutely.
This is how we are no, or angry or unjan, but there's a root. It comes from a root.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right. Maybe I meant it from the perspective. I totally agree with you, and we're on the same page. But maybe from my lens that I was taking it is, if we sort of describe depression as feelings of sadness,
okay,
and then when you look at maybe philosophy, it will talk about how we get to label what's wrong, what's bad, what's good. So some of the things, it depends on the label that you put on them.
Okay.
So if you put a label that this is a bad thing and then ultimately you're sad, then it leads to depression like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, maybe bona, if things would happen and they didn't label them as bad because of leto, then maybe they skipped depression in that sense. But like you said,
okay,
like nangabe imvotsa yakho iyakushaya. And just because we are at depression,
what's when yakuthanza? You wouldn't see that as a problem.
You wouldn't see that as a problem. But as you say, letting it in for you can't escape. Lokuthi uyakushaya ngendeka kuyakuthikameta nasemtimbeni, which leads to depression, uyabona. And ngendeka le depression leyo beyiphuma ngaletinye tindlela. Bamfu banga understand ukuthi how depressed kahle kahle, uyabona. So absolutely with you there. And I think another thing is sakhuluma ngestigma. Kulkhuni to open up about it, and it's often misunderstood. I think this sivamsile sometimes hlangana nemumvu longathi maybe engqondweni timfati kahlaliseki kahle, so uyahamba emgacweni ungcunu, uyabona. It's easy kusheshe sive ngathi uyahlanya noma kube ngathi uloyiwe, uyabona, bamsebentile. Kanti ngalesinye isikhathi ukhanza ukuthi ngitodona lenza abantu abo depression.
Yes.
People lomunye njengoba sibasha nje were building hopes and dreams of the lives that we're going to live. And then when we come to the point where it seems like those dreams are not going to happen, are not going to become a reality. For some people, it's hard to accept that or come into terms with it. So, ukanza ukuthi njengoba sishito, you may withdraw from activities that you used to love. You may withdraw from society. You may withdraw from reality. Iphuma ngetindlela letahlukahlukene. So, kwenda kube lukhuni ke if kunale misinformation to even deal with it head on, because njengibekise lamakhaya ethu masitojaga ukuthi bamsebentile noma uloyiwe, and it's a thing, it's happening. These are actual mindsets that exist. One time there was a young boy, because ekhaya sinetinkuku siyahlutha, so masakucoca lapha siyahlutha, uthi yena ke ngiyakutshela mina emakhaya la soka khona le emambani bayaloyana lapha thina kunalelinye likhaya lapha labamfana bakhona bonke bayaphasa, sabe sesiyeva ukuthi lo babe uthatha ingqomvo tala abamfana balekhaya afake ngala, akhiphe le ngqomvo lengala afake kulala bangale. Why are you laughing?
I can picture the guy as you're telling this story.
I don't even want to laugh. I don't want to laugh because these are beliefs. And if Guma beliefs lo muntu is identified with them, and good to long amchela gone.
Yeah.
But the reason sometimes we're not able to deal with these things, and look, African science is there. It might be a lived reality, but I don't think there are that many powerful people who can take out her brain. And if the West knew there was someone like that, they would have come for them by now, I think. But what I'm trying to say is that if sicabanga kanjalo, kube sekuba lukhuni kubona ukuthi hawu labamfana ngendeka bafeyila nje
because of
the environment. Yabona batali bahlukene, they always witness batali bashayana noma bathethisana noma i-diet ayisiko balanced, ku-overlookeka konke lokho bese kubuka ukuthi kunababe scojana ngale ukhipha ingqondo afake ngala. You understand?
Okay, I just want to say, and I'm happy that you also said so, African science and maybe this thing tegloyana dikhona, ne? And sometimes they are so extreme that maybe because, let me say, because of our lack of exposure to them, some of us are easy to say, really though, how do you take a brain from this mutilunjalo and kanjalo noma uyabo, all those type of things. But these things are there, and some of them might be true, though they might not make sense in some of us. But that doesn't take away, again, the element of saying, what then do we do about it? How do we then navigate those things? How do we, not because probably cinema solutions, Claudia, as we're talking, and maybe and somebody is listening to us will think, okay, yes, my bongo, you've raised that, then what is the solution? Probably we don't know. But I just wanted to say, that's where then the understanding of, I shared with you the other day, I'm working on some project, and it addresses a person's individual self itself, the person's self. It addresses you from a mental to a body to a spiritual. Then that's where the element of spirituality then comes into play, that you also need to pay attention to that. You need to pay attention to African spirituality. How does it work, and how does it affect me? How do I navigate those spaces? How do I avoid those things if I can? And it's
but anyways, imagine it's true, right? African spirituality, Sima Africans, we need to go back and learn about it and understand how it may
because
be affecting
you can't be naive about it, Claudia.
Yeah,
because
but
then
mnengesaba ukuthi uyaqala uyangena lapho ube hooked, so hlale usimisile nasendlini lapha uyalokha bamfu soyesaba yo ngente kuyangiloya phela lona, living in that paranoia in itself could even lead to depression in itself.
Yeah, the facts, it can lead to depression in itself. But again, I usually say, yes, but it doesn't mean it does not exist. I was watching this series, and I would love to recommend that series for a lot of people, The Chosen. And it actually it's a Christian, yeah, it's a Christian, but there's something that I paid attention to. Uyathi ukuthi lento yekholelwa enveni, it's real kangakanani. Lento yekuthi ukholelwe enveni tsite, ukholelwe into a higher power, and do certain practices because you believe that higher power recognize those certain practices. I think if as a people we need to recognize and accept the fact that vele impilo, part of it is to believe into a certain higher power, and we need to explore that side of ourselves.
I'm with you there, 100%.
Yeah.
It's partly why I've shared with the audience before as well that if I'm blessed enough and I have children, I want to raise them in that route.
Yeah.
But then again, there's something that has been observed.
Okay.
Guti, this worshipping a higher power is something that is seen more, one, in Africa, two, in the less privileged societies. The elite, the 1 percentile, they tend to be more atheist. What do you think about that?
Okay, I've heard that, and I probably I will say again, Claudia, and not trusting or not doing. It's just like what we were talking about, guloguloya na negloyo. Us not understanding that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. See, impilo is governed by principles of life itself. Even the atheists, they will tell you that. They will tell you about karma. They will tell you about acts of kindness. They don't call it loving your neighbor as you love yourself because it's scripture and whatsoever, but they tell you about it's an act of kindness. This doesn't mean that if I am calling it an act of kindness, it doesn't mean it is the root of love. It doesn't mean it is not. And I'm making an example about Christianity because I know Christianity more than any other things, and in Kuleleko, again, environment. So me calling it meditation instead of prayer doesn't take away the fact that it's the practice itself is about centering and understanding and grounding my emotions.
Yeah, right? I love.
So at the end of the day, I'm trying to say you can call yourself an atheist, but if there are principles of life that you go about, and because you don't label them as Christianity or as Buddhism or as whosoever labels them, doesn't take away the fact that they are just principles of life. Absolutely.
I agree with you. I've been quite on a journey. I've never been atheist, but I have identified as agnostic.
What's that?
Agnostic is basically saying God could exist, God might not exist. Okay. I'm not sure. And then I move on to deist. Deist is basically God does exist, but it doesn't have any influence whatsoever on what's happening on earth. And while at it, as people who tune in on this podcast, they might know that I've quite taken the philosophical route, specifically Stoicism.
Yeah.
But I want to agree with you on this point about Guti, sometimes it's just we're using different wording. Yeah. And that's why sometimes people say all the roads lead to God. Everyone is looking for God. Yeah. So someone else calls it the universe. Someone else calls it the creator. Someone else says God. And I think it's the reason in one of the episodes in the past where we have Skill as a guest, he talks about how that is why you'd see people who maybe are heathens, who are not necessarily Christians, but still apply the biblical maxims. They might seem to be doing well in marriage. Yeah. And that is because, as you say, there are principles of life. Yeah. It's just about how you choose to go about it. And it's important for you to figure out what works for you. And why not that? Because I did share with the audience that I was going to share my journey. I've been doing a lot of work in the background when it comes to my spirituality, especially in the religious concept. Okay. I'm still having difficulties. It's still really hard. It's a huge transition for me. But
bathi ngicela kubaceba kuthi bathi la ngemuva
Bathini?
basayamba kusasuye esonpheni. It's not a question, it's not a suggestion, but it's a call.
Yes, yo guys,
Yeah.
Shem, I've been having more religious conversations. I've cited the Bible a couple of times and I was like, yo, ngisalati. And I've been going to church a couple of times and lang invite khona mayengita ufika Shem. And look, I think I've gotten to realize the importance of church, which is something that we're going to speak about in relation to our conversation today.
Yeah.
But I just really want to strongly run through, as we're talking about the causes of depression in our ecosystem. And also we see other things as gender norms, in votaikali.
Yeah.
Such statements. They also exacerbate depression. Because like you said, just because kuthiwa invotes ayikhali akusho ukuthi adikho le timvo letingenda le votes ikhali.
Exactly.
Dikhona le timvo. And I think I understand where it comes from, especially from the African context. Izinto zawu expect ukuthi you have things figured out.
Yeah.
Kubukwe wena, you know. And it's like when we see you cry, we're seeing you at your weakest and you don't want to be seen at your most vulnerable for enemies to attack. Sometimes attack nje kwe enemy kuthi even ngisho maybe girlfriend wakho noma umkakho akasakuboni nje ngale authority figure leyo because maybe ubona ukhala uyabona. So bese kuba umsimvo from there ekhaya. But I think maybe the slogan should have changed to ukuthi maybe invotes amele yati ukuthi ikhale kuphi.
Yeah.
Uyabona?
I like that.
Yeah. Kubo malume, kubo noma ifunziso ukuthi ikhala kanjani. Maybe ngendlela lengeke ize iende ibonakale. At its weakest.
Because vele iyadzinga
iyadzinga lokubhodla uyabona. Most of the time some psychologists will talk about the man cave. Kuthi bonakala ngakuthi yek man cave yoba yodvana nje icabange izindle ngetinkinga tayo nokuthi ngasolva njani tinto uyabona. Bakhulume naye ukuthi mele ibe nema elders, the people that he respects or look up to that can talk to about things. So I think indzaba nje bekumele ihambele ngalapho, but nje otherwise invoda iyadzinga ukukhala.
I like what you just said, Claudia, about kuti invoda and we're using invoter maybe because of our context here, Africa and Eswatini per se. But look, again, let me just quote this. Well, there's a scripture in the Bible that says a man shouldn't be alone, right? This life thing is not for us to do on in isolation. And most of the time we reach that scripture when we're relating it to marriage and whatsoever. When in an actual sense, that scripture talks about life, doing life in generally. So this idea of invotai kali, like you said, is not really how it should be. And maybe it has been interpreted wrong. Probably even where it comes from, it wasn't about to say it like that. Vele at the end of the day, invoter should color in the environment, or umuntu, not even invoter alone, should color in the spaces where vulnerability can be can be seconded and whatsoever, or you can be supported.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, there are enemies that are waiting and looking for those moments to attack when you're most vulnerable. So it is important to be careful about your vulnerability as well.
Yep.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is to encourage and just echo what you're saying, to say this life thing is not for one to do on their own or in isolation. It is important to find circles and places or individuals that can support you on doing that. That's the emphasis on mentors, the emphasis in disciples, the emphasis on counselors and all those type of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you. All right. Coffee. I'll need to wrap up soon.
It's been a great conversation.
Yeah. And other things, it's historical and racial trauma. I often think about this a lot. It's a legacy of oppression.
Yeah.
Si bantu, especially labamnyama. I still feel inherently we are operating from a place of sitalwa bamfula bane trauma. laba nale depression, and it has been passed down generations and generations. And in order to see ukuthi passing down trauma is a thing, there's a book that I once read talking about how sometimes lengi trauma I pass down through words. Ibekisa ngokuthi nangabe nje ungumfana ungena ekhaya elinetinja uhamba namakwakho.
Yes.
Mangena kilo uva abcinisa lesandla kakhulu la sandleni. That's passing to you ukuthi you are not safe.
Yeah.
So khanza ukuthi kucala kwakho kusabatinja was because of that. Uyabona, when you're not even aware, so tibona nje usabatinja, but you're not even aware how it was passed down to you. So I think we have a past of our parents bahlupheka, suffering, war, babulawa, slavery, and namuhla siphila, we feel less of a human, especially to other races, especially to other people of certain social class. We feel inferior. Loku sende ekugcineni kwawo konke sitive depressed. For an example, as such I say even other opportunities, because we don't feel worthy enough, we don't feel good enough, we don't feel worthy of being in certain offices, in certain spaces, in certain things that we even get, and sometimes you find that we even deserve. But le inferiority that came with slavery and colonization, solo ihleti. I remember one time just having a conversation with someone about the violence in South Africa, and not to paint South Africa in a negative light. We love South Africa. It's representing Africa in all good ways, by the way. But it's quite popular for quite some violence as well. And it was talking about, and me and the conversation with this person, actually they are a Westerner, and they were saying, I understand why they are angry. What apartheid did to them, the anger that was passed on to these people. And it's like, nyalo bayikiphele kuphi le anger, bayise kuphi, because tendeka le tinfo, and baba affected, uyabona, baba dehumanized. Nyalo le anger yini and mele iphume, and ititshengisa kuphuma kwayo ngani, ititshengisa ngabo GBV, ngama gangsterisms. Because I was watching, you remember, awungitshele lokho. Mavesta, when you listen to his story, he talks about violence being an art. He enjoyed it from passionately
so, yeah.
But then when you hear his story, we have alando, violence was a thing, and it's because they were rebelling against the Mapunu because of apartheid. So it started as something like that. They got used to killing. They got used to having violence as a place of art. And then masobuka umntali wakhe baba wakhe makakhula already bekasasejele yena. Uyabona? So umati baba wakhe already una 13 with my father by that time it doesn't mean anything. Mina kusukela when I was 9 I was going out and about zropa etitolo. Uyabona? So all of that uyabona ukuthi there's layers to a human. Namuhla sasifunze ephepheni ukuthi bhuti lo sebenza kumathapha ugwaze girlfriend wakhe. He sneaked in endlini enhlangano. Wamela khambe makwasisi. And sneaked in, stabbed 10 about 12 times, wamshiya lapha. And today it's this cover page story, but there's layers to a person. Usiyathuka siyamangala, but kusukaphi logo.
Exactly.
We understand. Exactly. A university student so share iletha lapha utibulele kusukaphi logo. We understand. So I think there is more to it. And hence why such conversations are important, because they keep on making us aware, desensitizing us, making us cautious and in that way. Other words that we hear is strong black woman. Wathinta umfazi, wathinta imbokodo.
Yeah.
Asa express manje. We're no longer in our feminine. We're no longer vulnerable. One of the things I've been hearing a lot from gents, guti they're dating masculine women. Asa be vulnerable tin. Mumvu here is to love you, to pamper you, to nurture, to what? To take care of you, to protect. But you're not opening up. You've built walls. Because when you have to be strong, when you have to be imbogoto. And I think nakhona, kusuka for valid reasons, a lot of our parents had to raise children as single parents because kuka kwaba nesikhathi whereby it still happens. So bosses had to raise kids by themselves. HIV/AIDS came, it wiped out a lot of parents. So vele bekufanele babe timbokodo, you know. But nyalo, they've had to carry all this burden by themselves, leading to depression. And depression siyibona ngani, like we've said, withdrawal. umuntu akasa participate, umuntu akasa honorisha ama invites. And it goes to extreme cases where people specifically can't move out of bed. Umuntu uyamvakashela kuMessi landlini. Sithini uyatenyanya.
Yeah, we're easy to say that when we
sit down. What's going on? Do you need help? And if you can, imklinele. Cases can be quite extreme. Umuntu akakhona ngisho ukuphuma embedeni, depression. No, zero will to live. And all for valid reasons, like we've been listing all of them. Could be religious, political, unemployment, money, guningi. And it's important for us to be aware so much that when you come across people on a day-to-day basis, noma uva ngathi sokuthukile noma ukuphethe kabi, mina nje ey'gendeke ekhumbini ngihlale ngitraumatizeke. Umuntu noma somthinza nge-mistake, ubuka khona bengithi utongishaya. Lapho simile vele nala khumbini, ikhumbi ithi ngicishe nyawa ngiyasima lapho. Manje ungithinzelani?
Where is that? Is it manzini?
Yebo kusuka kamanzini. Manje ungithinzelani? Ngiyaxolisa baba. Ungithinthela, hey ngaze ngasitha okhotshwa ngilomye baba ngemuva amvusela mshana unjani wangikhathahleka. I was scared for my life. But at the back of my head and I was so apologetic nambe nginako kwata ukuthi kwecala simile lana kufuteke ngabe asigemi selishonile. So ngase frustrated, but in my head I was like yathi angimathi uthi ilanga lakhe liqale njani.
Yeah.
Angimathi ngento kustresswa i-rent noma kudla noma bamalile. So we just need to be cautious, and that's why today I said I don't want to talk about depression as a clinical thing. I just want to talk in terms of sadness, something that we're all experiencing from time to time. Anxiety, cabanga future, we are not where we want to be emotionally, financially, relationshipically, friendshipically, anyway. So ngisho emsebenzini mawufika vele kutoba nemuntu abe ne-attitude noma uya gatekeeper noma uba difficult. It's important to be mindful where people are going through things. Ngiyalo nje USAID cut its funding. A lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people are frustrated. Their families to provide for. Lo munye impilo ishintsha drastically. Noma khona lo shonile ekhaya bekayi-provide sekumele abuyele ekhaya akasakhona i-granta. So we need to be kind, sensitive and mindful because people are going through a lot. But as much as they are going through a lot, I think we do get to a position whereby we talk about these negative things and everything that is happening that is negative, making us even more depressed. Yeah. And I just want to urge all of us to have a moment of gratitude. What is the government actually doing? What are people actually doing? And it could feel like, Claudia, tina asidingi counseling, dingi imali. Noma asidingi more NGOs, sidinga ukuthi lala khona abe functional. But it's like, guys, I think it takes time to build anything. Anything is built over time. So we could start off by having gratitude. Sicala nje sibonge bona the actual people who usavuka umuntu aye esibhedlela anake with care. As much as maybe the environment ayivumi, maybe good equipment yokuthi umsebenzi awende kahle, but they still show up and do the job. Those are the people that we need to be grateful for. We need to be grateful for the people that are forking out of their pockets to go and study more so that they come back to influence policies for the betterment of the people. Because there's more to what is happening around us that we can even see with our naked eyes. There's more to what's happening maybe na media, and we just feel like, the government should be doing this, and we think it's as easy as just that. But there's a lot of efforts that needs to go behind in order to change my attitudes, mindset, to change the financial positioning of communities, of societies. Things are built over time. One of the examples, my mother was making an example of about Mozambique and the uprisings at the moment. Guti Mozambicans are rioting, Eswatini, the country is still in the same position. Solo wahambe Maputugezi. And she was saying that, but nations are built over time. Lo hulumende labafuna kumsusa bevengathi ugabi has been there. Kunetibhedlela letakhiwe, kunemigwaqo leyakhiwe since then, and timvo takhiwa over time. And sometimes we just need to pause and be a little bit appreciative, because nalabamvu labenda letimvo batenda in the midst of corruption, batenda in the midst of there are still resources lapuma go in Africa, and they go to these international countries. They work within maybe nabo limited funding. There are still elite economists, because when you look at the situation of Zimbabwe, they were sanctioned because bamvula bamhlophe. And it's like economy ayikoni ukukhula kahle because they are sanctioned, and the government has to work within logo ba sanctioned logo. So people could easily just feel like, our government is not doing anything, our president is not doing anything, but lo muntu naye maybe is working under pressure from those kinds of pressures. So there's a lot for our governments to also navigate as well. I think Njemautu Uyabuga, there's a lot of projects that are going on that are being put out there. There's one that I was looking at, Pumelela Mental Health. They focus on providing guidance and counseling and support regarding mental health challenges in our communities. And while I was looking up, when you look at their landing page, there's a variety of free, readily available resources that you could download. And it's like, Claudia, imali. That is what could solve our challenges. But at the same time, like we said, it's also about state of mind.
Yeah.
Because if it was just about money, people from elite economies, they would not be getting depressed. They would not be committing suicide. So many times I watch Obuge Bamfu Hollywood, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, you're so happy, I want to be like you. But lama stories I puma later on whereby we're reading Uba, they were raped, they just went through dehumanizing situations to be where they are. And at face value, all you see is that they have money, they are happy, but they've had to succumb a lot to be where they are. So if things were like that, but we need to start by learning to be happy from where we are with what we have. Making an example of Eswatini nje. Lokphila watu ukuthi safe. Most of the time I feel safe. Unlike in situation where I've been in Joburg and I feel like I have to keep on watching my back, So you are safe, you have access to fresh food at the market, access affordable. You have access to that, which in some places people don't have access to organic food. And that doesn't mean that things can't be better. They can. But it's also important for us to just get sucked into our current environment and really be appreciative of where you are. So as I was stating that the Pumelela website on their landing page, there's a lot of free resources there, and I was so happy to find a document talking about Slogo sayo sithi nje yehlisa umthwalo. What does it say? It talks about ukuthi yehlisa umthwalo, like offload your load, and it's written in Siswati, which means that now everyone can have access. It affects everyone. And when you read it, you get to condition the way your brain thinks and approaches things, and you can get to talk about them even at the family level, even educate your children around it, so that by the time leskatis figure they have to face mental health challenges, they already know the tactics, what's within their control, what they can do that's within their control to face depression, to face these mental health challenges. Environment labagiyo, so I think governments and relevant stakeholders, they are playing their bit. Kwaka Invotsanje is having tours around bafunzisa bafana youth on having skills that would help them monetize about kubanje invotes, I think positive masculinity, guiding them on mindset, on leadership. I think all of those are beautiful initiatives because, like we say, to finish an elephant, you need to bite once at a time.
Yeah.
So I think these talks, these groups, these initiatives being there, it's a starting point, just having them available. And then the next thing is making them efficient. The next thing is making them accessible. So I would just say each one of us, let's also take it upon ourselves to do the research. Look online. What are readily available resources to help you through? So by learning, by labeling how you feel, having words to describe it, what could be causing it, and how you could deal with it, I think it's a great starting place to be dealing with these issues. And then logunye will come with time. And as Kofi has already mentioned, we're not wired to live in isolation. And partly we live in isolation because siyasebenda, we are hyper working that is to achieve our goals and our dreams. Wonke umuntu ubusy. Siyasuka emakhaya site emadolobheni impilo idulile emadolobheni awufuni ngisho ukuvakashelwa bomzala kuningi. But we truly do need to try and invest and cultivate working on our relationships. Speaking of njengoba besikhuluma ngecolonization ukuthi we adopted emasiko ebamfla abamhlophe ngibo labafika necapitalism. And bonavele they live in isolated structures, which is something that doesn't work for our people because we are very communal people, and because siphila ngema capitalistic rules ku-economy lengavumeli capitalism so isolated. Kanti bekumnanzi lokwadi ukuthi umfana ukhuliswa i-community.
Yes.
Timfo sitenda as a community.
Yes.
So ngisho kufika tikhathi tetikulfisi uyathi ukuthi ukhona malume angasita and folk in something. Ngisho ngishada ifamily yahlangana and folk in their bit. Nyalo konke kuze kwendeke, for anything to move you have to do it by yourself. So tikhanza le burden yonke ila kuwe. Umfana umkhulisa by yourself. Mangasoko ukuthi ukhona mele ube nemali ukuthi uyakhona kummikisa ku daycare. Konke lokho kusenda sigcine si overwhelmed. So I think when it comes to the communal values, we could try a little bit to work and cultivate that and do more of that. I'm normally happy when I hear more ladies talk about how they are going out for lunch with their friends. That's investing in friendships. But sometimes ngisho kude le mali asihlangane nje and do a cheap activity. Let's go for a walk together. Coffee, when he came here, he said he took a walk, and when he got here, he said, oh, I needed that walk. And it's like, yeah, sometimes it's literally the thing that's gonna help you get through. It's that walk. It's journaling. It's calling a friend. It's being mindful of what you eat. Instead of buying maybe an energy drink in El Panis, you actually buy a fruit. You actually have that beautiful. It's all those things that we might already know, but actually being accountable, taking charge, and actually exercising them. Kuzama nekuzama nje lapha nalapha. But besishito ukuthi sitawuthinza even in terms of spirituality and faith. I think it goes a huge role, and that's where I got to appreciate the church structures. Yes, there is an argument about ukuthi, what if as Africans nje this is all propaganda or something to keep us busy, the whole introduction of churches and God. And it's like, well, you could view it from different lenses. But I think for me, looking at church, it has provided a community for a lot of people. Church has provided a community for people. Ngisho nalaba buya jele, umuntu bekafika nakathi uyabuya la ngaphandle, i-society ayisam-accept. Church is there, is a starting place. Church is the starting place if, let's say, usuke emakhaya ude emadolobheni. A community that is already readily available for you, and ukuthi labamfla balapha, they think this way, they value God, they value virtue, they value the rules of life, living a better life. They value, and as much as maybe they will not be able to practice these things 100%, but they know you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. They know you should love God with all your heart, your soul, and mind. So Loguba in that kind of a community, and also the one that brews positivity, is very good. And it's where I've gotten to value religion, Christianity, and all its maxims, the Bible as well. Because Maubuga, more than anything, it's trying to drive positive values in society. So if you're someone who strongly believes in God, it's important, get into your prayer. Pastors, they avail themselves. Guys, there was a lady that I know that was sick, and there was a pastor that was coming to pray for her. And I was thinking that njengoba nje sila micashweni ngendeka ifamily bale khashanele nemakhaya. But nje info that I love about being in Eswatini and being African, athi noma ungagula usamcashweni angakugule wetfana. Nebamfla batokuta batokuhlola, bakuphekele, kuthi umfundisi akuthandazele, umuntu athathe isikhathi sakhe athi uyokuthandazela, and uva ngathi that is his mission emhlabeni. So that's just to say everyone's role is important, and it's important for us to look at those things and appreciate them. Kuthi later on maybe batabese bahamba bayokhuluma tindzaba takho sekungilokunye. But ngesikhathi usagula bebave bashayela bafuna ifamily yakho ukuthi yo mele simikise nangumuntu esibhedlela. There's so many times I come across posts on Facebook where someone maybe ukwaziwe or something is happening, but how asim donatelen, that is ubuntu, that is communal, and it's just really to say, let us take time to appreciate such initiatives, be mindful of them, and be that person one day now donator, or be that person one day who contributes to community in that way, because community is sacrificial. So as a society about depression, it's one of the things I've learned. Sometimes we get depressed because we go too much into our inner world to think about what am I missing in Leshotago. I should be where, this is where I should be. But sometimes it starts by giving. Give. Humble volunteer, give. And while you do that, we are busisega and you feel good. And you get to realize, oh, yeah, there are people who are going through worse than I am. And you get to appreciate what you have and where you are. So all of these things are just there to help us push through with resilience, because I think life is inherently hard. Life is inherently hard. There's nothing you can do about it. Even when you look at animals. When you look in the jungle, guys, fighting for survival, I just think life is inherently hard. And then there's the other things that we deal with that are a bit out of our control, corruption, and I would just say it's a matter of learning the rules of the game and playing the game. Not self-pity, not feeling sorry for yourself. Let us just work with what we have and keep on pushing. Keep on pushing. It's just getting the excitement from pushing and thinking that you're doing things for the greater cause that are going to contribute to your community. And also consistently just grounding yourself. In negativity, itawufika futhi ifikele anyone at any point in time. Sihlale siva kunabo midlife crisis. Kunani nani kuyohlale kufika kuyohlale kukhona. But it's just a matter of ukuthi masobona ukuthi I'm giving up. Ubuyele ugcine edvolweni nangabe ugcine edvolweni. Ugcine ku-meditation nangabe ugcina ku-meditation. Uqhubeke ucale from ground zero with as much positivity, enthusiasm, and also appreciating the role of where you are at the present moment, right? Focus on what you can control, as the Stoics would say. Focus on what you can control. What you can't control, leave it to fate. So do your bit where you can, 100%. Go for a walk when you can.
Yes.
Qala leyo business uthengisela amafethi if you can. You're doing something. You're out there. Volunteer if you can. Do what you can. Because the moment you give up and you lose hope, that is where the suicide comes. That is where you start lashing out onto other people. GBV starts. That is where all the abnormal behavior begins. Because we're not able to start by having gratitude for where we are and work with what we have. I was actually thinking about another thing, Weguti. I think another thing that we do not premeditate on, and we could actually premeditate on and get into terms with, is accepting. As much as we have dreams that I want to be here at this point in time, but do premeditate on, what if I'll become that aunt that never gets married? What if I become that uncle that never gets to have that G-Wagon? What if I become a teacher for the rest of my life, even though it's never what I wanted to do? I think it's important to premeditate on those things. What if I become a cleaner for the rest of my life, yet it's never what I wanted to do? What if there'll be talks around it, it will make you depressed. But I think it's some of the things that we need to premeditate on. And as much as they will be uncomfortable, but at the same time, we get to a place of acceptance and peace with it, and do the most out of it, and do the most out of it. Offer yourself the best way that you can. Position, understanding that happiness, money does facilitate happiness. Better living conditions do facilitate happiness, but also happiness is also a state of mind. There's a story by Liliane Bettencourt from France. She was once the richest woman in the world. She came from wealth. Babwake founded L'Oreal, which is a huge cosmetic company. And when you follow her story, she had all the money in the world, but she still had depressive episodes. When you learn that her husband, they slept in different bedrooms. Her husband wasn't really that into women. They had only one child. She had to live life in an orderly way. And, you know, being a person of that stature, you have to be so concerned about what the public thinks, the way that you carry yourself. It's almost as if she was living in a jail. So wealth was there, but was she happy? She wasn't. So to think wealth is the one thing that is going to make us happy, now khona stojapa, because masters the acquire will realize ukuthi solo asiko happy. Njengoba namanje maybe kuningi lesik-acquire shile lebe sikufisa yesberg. But are we happy now? No, we're not. So it's a state of mind, and it's just really about keeping each other accountable in that way. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much once again for joining us in today's episode. It was probably pretty much long. Now, coffee so because Claudia is going on and on.
No, maybe just as a way of wrapping up, maybe contribution. I love, like I said at the beginning of this, at the end of the day, these conversations, as we're having them, I'm here sitting and I'm busy nodding, like you're saying, but I'm consuming with learning. I'm consuming with that heart of actually being, we had to veil. We had, and I really need to adjust to this. And I think that's the very most important step that people need to appreciate or even learn to discover. The fact that the moment you realize, no man, I'm not feeling okay. The moment I'm losing my interest of waking up, I'm losing all. Then the idea is that's a call. That's an indicator to you need to do something about that.
Yep.
And sometimes you just need to vuga. Ne? You don't know what
take action.
Yeah, you don't know what to vugela kwendani. You don't know, but just vuga nje. Awuvuga uhlale. Uyabo noma uvuga walk.
Absolutely.
Do something. And that's because the only way that we bring light, the only way that we destroy darkness is by introducing light.
Exactly.
So the moment you just introduce light into this problem, then you've already started destroying that darkness.
That's
it might
powerful.
come back later. It might come back it might come back later, even stronger and whatsoever. But then at least now you know that the light works.
Yep.
And the second thing, maybe just to add on what you were saying, the idea of thinking that only we can achieve the kind of life that we want to live with only maybe it could be money, maybe it could be a relationship, ngifuna kujola, ngifuna kuba partner. Thinking that when you acquire that, you will then be happy. It's really not the case. I think what people need to understand at the end of the day, or as individuals, what we need to teach ourselves is the understanding of the fact that life will always balance things up. There's always the yin and the yang.
Yep.
There's somebody that has 100 million probably in their bank, but they are not healthy. And they are dealing with cancer. They are fine. So there is something that is always going to be there challenging you. It's a matter of understanding and accepting that life will always balance us up. And how do I get to live in that balance?
Absolutely. When you say it balances us up, I totally hear you.
It does,
wealthy. And nabo they'll be sad at that time, and they might get into a depressive episode. So all speaking to the fact that happiness is a state of being, contentment is a state of being that you cultivate, right? And this is not
Claudia.
And every day, literally every day. You know, my partner has this habit where when I'm done, he's gonna be like, what are you grateful for today? And sometimes I just push back and I'm like, I'm not grateful for anything. I don't want to do this. Can we just talk about something else? And we were watching a podcast together then. And then it was talking about gratitude and the importance of just being grateful and talking about what you're grateful for and how it just really alleviates your thinking, the way you think. And I was like, oh my God, I need to work on this. Always have something that you're grateful for. Because yes, it's like, Claudia, things could get better, but they could get worse as well.
Exactly.
There could be, and there's someone always going through worse than what you're going through. And this is not to dismiss what you're going through. It's not to invalidate it, but it's just saying life will always be tough, but let us hang in there. Let us show up. Vuga, do something. Hey, love yourself to being happy. Okay? Just fight for life. Learn to love life every day. Okay?
Yeah.
And
Correct.
do what you have, really. Do what you have. You know, I always think about how sometimes people encourage me, Claudia, you could start being an independent lady, uphume ekhaya, uticashele. And I'm like, ngijake kuyoti isolator. Ngishiye make ngijake kuyoti isolate. Ngijake my bills. Why would I do that? Why can't I just enjoy spending more time with my mom, being at home, escape renting, escape my expenses as much as I can, leverage lokuthi ngikule position leyo, because kunalo cashile hayi ngoba uyathanda, because the situation imbita ukuthi acashe, maybe kude ekhaya, maybe ude ngalamadolobheni because of umsebenzi. So I just want to highlight that sometimes letting your team for stifakela nanathi le stress.
Facts.
You know, and what you touched on, ukuthi cabanga ukuthi a relationship will make you happy, not using things as a means to an end. I'm not getting in a relationship to achieve happiness, you know, but as a principle of life, I'm getting in a relationship because it's important
to do life with somebody.
To do life with somebody, you know. So we could go on and on and on. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in on Real Talk with Claudia today. I hope, I'm confident that you learned a lot today. There were a lot of reminders. Please do share this episode with someone that you think needs it. Please do watch it with somebody that you think that could be a lot to reflect on and have conversations about. And if you are going through a depression or are facing prolonged deep sadness, please do seek the necessary help. Search for the relevant facilities that could assist you, and also do apply the tips that we've shared here today. We are confident that they work, that they help. I've faced depressive episodes. Coffee, as someone who's a mental health activist as well, I'm pretty confident that he also has episodes of it. So we're talking based on things that we faced, that we're going through, that we witness in our environments. Please do try to apply these tips. Knowing is not enough. Listening is not enough. But actually exercising it. Even if you feel like it's childish or it's stupid. But I swear to you, exercising these things goes a long way. It's like a dose of medicine, if I may say. And as you know, we end every episode with a quote. And I have two quotes. One of them is, mental health is not a destination, but a process. It's about how you drive, not where you are going. You never achieve a place where you're like, oh, no, I'm healthy, I'm good. Something is always going to come along. But it's about, do I have the tools to face these things? Do I have the tools to get myself to a position where I feel strong and healthy and resilient again? And lenye ke ingesiswati ngithole khona ku PDF yakuphumelela lethi yehlisa umfalo, ithi awusuwo umfalo unemfalo le na uchazwa uyesinza ngendlela lesimanga ukuthi ungawethwala wetfana. Ungethwali wetfana. Find safe spaces. You know, sometimes I have people writing on me on Instagram, opening up, and just that 20-minute conversation we had, it makes them feel better again. So many people tell me that they tune in this podcast and it helps them survive as well. So such things truly do go a long way. As usual, we will strongly encourage you to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, to keep on tuning into this podcast, to share it with other people, hit the notifications button. This helps that whenever we release an episode, you are aware, you still watch it hot and fresh. We'll still be looking forward to your feedback, what you think, and please do engage in the comments. What you think are the causes of depression, what we can do to combat depression. Otherwise, until the next episode, with love.